Hey there, MeetEdgar community. We are back with another case study today. This time it is brought to you by one of our users, Jake, and I am going to hand it over to Jake to introduce himself. Tell us a little bit about your business and what brought you to Edgar.
Yeah, well, great. It's good to hang out with the MeetEdgar community. I feel like I've been a part of the family for quite a while, a happy member of the family. I have a couple of businesses. Probably the one that most people are familiar with. I've run a podcast, the Modern Leadership Podcast, since 2014. Over 300 episodes, mostly interviewing CEOs, authors, entrepreneurs, and that type of thing. And then I also run a law firm, an estate planning law firm located in Arizona. And so those are really the two things that keep me most busy and probably most relate to MeetEdgar and how we use it.
Nice. Yeah. Having a passion for podcasting these days really takes a lot of time to make sure that all the hard work you're putting into your podcasts gets seen by the world. And social media is such a great place to do that. And I also love the fact that you're using this for multiple brands, just because it takes so much time to log into each and every social media account you have to make sure you're staying consistent and updated with people. So how have you found that using MeetEdgar has really helped you in that way?
Well, I tend to be the type of, business owner and person that I don't spend a whole lot of time on social media, but I recognize the importance of it. It's really not my style really to, post everything that's going on in my life or with my kids. And so for me, I just needed something that was simple, easy to use, something that I could understand and that didn't require me to spend, 2, 3, 4, 5 hours a day on social media. And so that's kind of where I started with MeetEdgar, is just, convenience.
Yeah, absolutely. I think social media can work for us, but sometimes, man, it feels like it is working us in general. So it's good to hear that having a system like this keeps you really streamlined in the fact that you're creating great content to get out in the world, but not having to get in the time suck hole of scrolling through social media all the time. So I love the way you have your categories set up here. So super organized, and making sure that you have network specific categories for like Twitter and Facebook when you need to change the language that way. And it seems like you have some other categories that might work for a bunch of different networks. Can you kind of talk me through your strategy of how you develop these and how you use these to simplify your social media?
Yeah, and it's somewhat changed over time as well, just as, the way that we've posted. I used to do a ton on Twitter. I mean, it was like blasting every 30 minutes. And then when Twitter changed their rules and basically you can't repeat content, I had to change my strategy as well. But you'll notice that within each category, and I mainly focus for MeetEdgar purposes on the three categories of the three social media networks of Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. And so you can see within each of those, on my Facebook, I have what I call old content. This is basically, it doesn't mean that it's super old. I mean, it could be a week old, but it means that it's already been posted once through the system. And then this is just a bucket for it to continue to post at some cycle moving forward. And by the way, I do that with LinkedIn. I do that with Twitter as well, although Twitter doesn't work with that reposting. But then you'll see that there's also one that says Feedly, and Feedly is just another program that I use that I can read some articles. And what I love about MeetEdgar is I'm reading an article, I like it. I have the Chrome extension, and so I'm reading an article, I like it. I just hit that Chrome extension and it adds it to the Feedly bucket so that I'm sharing other people's content as well. And then I have this section called Learning from Leaders, which is just quotes. They're quote pictures that I've made. I've made them all in LinkedIn. I've made them all image sized for LinkedIn, image sized for Facebook, image sized for Twitter. And then that's just a bucket that randomly schedules out to send those quotes out, so that I'm always kind of touching my audience a couple of times a day in each of these accounts. And then you'll see down a little bit further, in the one that's called Twitter Bank. Twitter Bank is the one that I've used. MeetEdgar has this option where you can do multiple versions of the same idea, the same tweet. And so I use that to schedule it. I manually do it. Yeah, the add variation. And I just manually do it. I actually have a program in Excel where I can put in different quotes from each of my podcasts, and then it spins out all of the hashtags, all of the links, all of that. And then I just drop it in there, copy, paste, add variation. And so those all go into Twitter Bank, because Twitter, as we've talked about, you can only use them once. So I like to get, for each episode of my podcast, between 20 and 30 tweets that go out. I schedule the first tweet to go out on Thursday morning at 7:30. And then after that, it just randomly posts the other 24, 25, 30, whatever I've created in that manually create variation.
I love that so much. Making sure that you are not looking at the fact that Twitter doesn't allow you to recycle the same exact tweet as something that doesn't mean you should still share your podcast episode multiple times, because you never know if someone hasn't seen it. So our variations feature here that Jake just beautifully explained truly does allow you to make sure that the hard work you're putting into your podcast or your blog post is able to be reshared on Twitter, but still fall in line with their term of service that says you can't send the same exact tweet multiple times. This feature is really great, I always think, for A/B testing too. So for someone like Jake with his podcast, perhaps he wants to test using just the headline, or perhaps he wants to test telling a personal story about it, or perhaps he wants to test pulling some different pull quotes out from his podcast episode and putting them as the social media status update. And then later coming back to Edgar and actually looking which one of those had the most clicks on and really resonated with people the most in the language that he was using. So I think for podcasts and blogs, this variations feature, you are using it in such an amazing way. And I
love how easy it is, because I started with MeetEdgar before we had this option, and you had to go in and do each one. And now you just go right down the line. I put all 20, 25, 30 in at a time. I love it.
That's so great. Batching it out so you can get that consistent story. That's so good. One other feature, you can use this for blogs or for even podcasts. If you put your podcast link in here, guys, you also will notice you get an auto-generate variations option. Clicking that will go ahead and pull out different pull quotes from within the blog post or from your podcast show notes and make those variations for you. So as Jake was saying, you can do this manually, just go ahead and get them all out, or you can use the auto-generate variations feature to save you a ton of time and keep you in compliance with that term of service there. So that's really
Megan, the reason that I use the manually schedule is because I do all this in advance. And so the links aren't live. Like on my podcast episode, they're not live. So the add variation automatically won't work until they go live. So I have to do it manually. But I love that auto generate feature when I want to reshare something, like maybe I look back over blog posts that have been performing really well, and then I want to kind of get them back engaged and spruce them up. I can take that old link, drop it in there, auto create, and just go from there with all new stuff.
That is such a great tip, making sure you're writing these even before it's live so you're not scrambling to get traffic to your newest episode in the last minute. I love that so much. So I'd love to shift gears from creating the content for a minute to look at your schedule here and to kind of talk about how you created this, how you actually decided what type of categories were going to go out at what time, and just walk us through your weekly recurring schedule here.
Yeah, you bet. And one thing to note, you'll see like Thursday morning, there's nothing scheduled to automatically go out. And that's because that's when I post everything live. So when I upload it to Edgar and I schedule send, that's when I always schedule it to send on Thursday morning. So I don't have it competing with anything else. I used to have this, like if you looked at it before when Twitter was more active, I would go every hour. But what I did is I did an analysis of when my readers, when the people who are following me on social, when they're the most active. And I found that there were different times during the day that they found that they were more active on my accounts. And so that's when I scheduled them. And then as you can see, I like to kind of split it up a little bit between what social networks I'm going on. Twitter, I post a lot more often on Twitter because the life of a tweet is what, 3 seconds, 5 seconds, nothing. Facebook, though, gets a little bit more long. You can do more long-term. You know, people, your post will stay relevant longer. People will see it longer. But then LinkedIn, I think, is I've had a lot of success with LinkedIn through MeetEdgar because there's less competition on LinkedIn, so my posts stay relevant a lot longer. And so you can see, like at 7:30 on Monday, LinkedIn Learning from Leaders, that bucket, that's the quotes that I was talking about. So Monday and Wednesdays quotes go out. On Friday, a LinkedIn old content, which is, a past podcast or a past blog post goes out. And then, like I said, on Thursday morning is when the brand newest one goes out. So there's always content going up there. And I'll be honest, Megan, I set this, I don't know, a year ago probably, and I haven't adjusted it in a year. It's probably time for me to go back in and do another analysis of when people are reading and make some adjustments. But it's so easy to do.
Yeah, I think your followers are quite lucky to have you. This sounds like a really nice way that you're paying attention to what the networks are telling you that they want to see. Oftentimes we get so mad at the algorithms, but truly they exist in this social media space to feed people the content that they're going to be most interested in. So if we kind of flip the script and think about it in a good way, as Jake has been noticing, you know what? Organic reach on LinkedIn is huge. People will actually take the time to come and learn on that network. So I don't want to overload my community there. I just want to give them this quality content in these consistent time frames where they can expect this from me. Over a whole year, he's been showing up for his followers there. And then realizing that Twitter is a place that is changing a lot too, and that we don't have control over these networks. A lot of the time you'll hear that when you're on social media and marketing, you're marketing on borrowed land essentially. So having all of your content in MeetEdgar and thinking about how you can use the networks rather than the networks using you again truly is how you're going to win and stand out on social media. So that's awesome. You're paying attention to the ways that the content is actually being consumed on each network there. So I would also love for you to talk me through a little bit about your personal opinions on how you load your content beyond just the way that you're doing your podcast episodes, because it looks like you've taken quite a bit of time to actually search out for leadership quotes and stuff like that. So where do you find these? Do you Google them? Are they just things you've come across over the years? How do you create that content in your MeetEdgar library?
So some of the quotes, I've been gathering quotes since I was like 8 years old, and I started creating them into an Excel sheet, and I think I've got over 1,000 quotes. It takes a lot of time. What I'd love to do is hire a virtual assistant to just go through and take all 1,000 of those quotes, create images, create nice looking things, and be able to post those into the bucket. At this point, I just took probably my top 100 quotes and created that. That was for that one bucket, that one category. I call them buckets, you call them categories, but
same
put
thing.
them in there. As far as what you're looking at right there, that header where it says leadership is not a linear path, that is actually the title of the blog post where that podcast episode is. The next paragraph right there is the paragraph of the intro that I would, as a podcaster interviewing, that's how I introduced Peter to my audience. So I just tagged that there. That bit.ly link, I love that MeetEdgar has this bit.ly shortener. It's linked into my own bit.ly account so that it tracks everything in bit.ly and does that. That's what that is just a link directly to the blog post page. And then I like to throw in a handful of hashtags in there. Just what I find, going through the article or going through the interview. You'll notice, I think if you scroll a little bit down and see maybe a Twitter post, right there, you can see how it's highlighted at Peter Lazaroff right there and at Plant Core. That's one thing that's actually newer. When we first started, it didn't, but these link directly to their account. And what I love is when you're adding in new content and you put at Peter Lazaroff, it gives you a drop down to click on it and tag them so that when it posts, this person who happens to be the guest on this episode of the podcast knows that I've posted it, which helps them to be able to reshare it.
Yeah, that is awesome that you're able to take advantage of the network effect of social media and actually tag these people, and hopefully they'll help share your stuff out if they realize that you're sharing their stuff. So that's really cool to see that you're able to do that. And I also just wanted to point out when we were going through the way that you actually created this content, it reminded me of what you were saying on your schedule of leaving those Thursday mornings free to make sure that you can schedule, send, and save specific posts. So if you guys haven't seen this feature before, the weekly repeating schedule that we were on is really fantastic for just setting it and forgetting it and making sure, again, you're creating that consistency with the categories or buckets of posts. But you can see right here in the library that what Jake's done is he's also taken advantage of our schedule, send, and save feature. For this post, he needs it to go out on a specific day, probably when the post goes live. So the way that he's doing that is in this add new content screen, you can actually set a specific date and time to send this out. So again, if you're leaving that Thursday morning free because you know you're going to need to send a specific post rather than just your evergreen posts, Edgar will give you the option to do that as well. So this is a really cool strategy, and I love that you're taking such good care to make sure you're not duplicating posts, but you're actually working this into a full social media strategy. That's really cool.
And I don't know where I'm going to be on the 12th. I might be traveling, speaking. I might be, taking my daughter to her, to school. I might be sick. I might be at Disneyland. I don't know where I'm going to be on March the 12th. But I do know that this person's episode needs to go live. Their episode will go live. It's already scheduled to. And now all my social is ready to go at that time. And one thing I also love is, as you'll notice when you clicked on those variations, there's like 20 variations of tweets going out. They don't start until that first one goes out. And as soon as that first one goes out on March 12th, then the rest of them, the other 19 or 20 or 25, go into that Twitter bucket and just get posted at those preset times on the schedule.
Yeah, it is kind of like putting a start date, especially for people like you who need this episode to go live when it's actually live on your site. So that's a really cool strategy to take. And I will be keeping my fingers crossed that you're at Disneyland rather than sick on March 12th. And this post
given the alternative.
Yeah. So this has been a blast getting to know your account a little bit here. And I would love just to end this on any other tips that you can offer the community or any of your other favorite features about MeetEdgar that we haven't covered yet.
Boy, I think we've covered all my, I don't use a whole lot of the tracking and the numbers, but you can pull a report and find out when everything's posted. I was just looking this morning to see some of the quote cards that I posted, and they've posted 6 or 7 times throughout the 4 years or so that I've been a member of MeetEdgar. So I really like that. You can see performance when they went out. You can see if they're expired, if they're not going to go out again. So I really like that. Other than that, we've covered all the great things about MeetEdgar that I love, but I'm an advocate for this company. I joined early in the days. I heard Laura on a number of podcasts, and I said, she's really pushing it hard. I'm going to go check this out. And I have used different programs in the past that just didn't do it for me. Great companies doing great things, but for me, I found a home here. And if I could only just add one last thing, Megan, there was one point where my bill went up, but I felt that it should have stayed the same. And within like 3 minutes of calling the company or emailing the company, I got a response. You guys worked with me. I mean, the customer service was just super outstanding. And I tell you, I'm a customer for life. I've been treated so well here that you can count on me each and every year to re-up.
Well, man, oh man, are you making me smile today. I really appreciate that ending. And we do love to take care of our community here because you guys are so great. And we know how much effort you put into social media to serve your communities. So it only makes sense that we serve you with just as much care. So thank you so much for those kind words and for sharing all your social media strategies with us today, Jake.
Sure.
Cool. Thanks a lot. All righty. Awesome. That was so great. Thank you so much for taking the time to do that with us.
You bet. You bet. Anything I can do to help you guys. You guys